Hey, welcome to Choo, I'm Jacob. I'm here in Lyndoch at the Medieval Fair and I've made a medieval stew for my medieval friends. The Barossa Medieval Fair is an annual medieval festival that takes place in the Barossa Valley. We frequent all kinds of different festivals, and this is one of our more popular ones where we go and sell our chili sauce and hang out with all our medieval buddies. It's always a fantastic, fun time. Whoa! So this time around I thought I'd knock up a stew prior to coming to the event so I could share it with all my buddies. So here's how I did it. So a medieval stew basically would consist of whatever you had left lying around, throw it in a pot, cook it up. For peasantry, meat was a rarity, not so much so, but it was quite a bit. So a lot of these things didn't have meat. They certainly wouldn't have had game meat. Game meat was more reserved for the upper class. A lot of peasants or just people in that area would just eat farmed meat. Pig, rabbits down south are very common, sheep and stuff like that. That's what often the scraps would go in the pot. We're being a little bit more luxurious because we live in 2022. And a lot of the foods that they would have put in there would have been seasonal. It's very important to remember. Preserving food was common, but it wasn't as easy as it is today. You couldn't get things all year round, so you'd eat whatever's in season. Right now it's towards the end of winter, so towards the end of winter, you wouldn't have much left to go into that pot. The other thing to consider is that regional foods were very common. A lot of foods we take for granted today, they simply didn't have in medieval Europe. For example, tomatoes didn't come over until colonization or extensive oceanic trade, so a lot of foods that we have that are super common today, you just wouldn't have. So this isn't really a traditional medieval stew at all, but it's medieval in spirit, and that is, I'm just going to go around the garden and throw whatever I can find in here. It is the end of winter, and I haven't gone shopping for quite a while, so I'm just going to go around, grab whatever I can find, and throw it in the pot. So it's medieval in spirit. Some of the ingredients they would have had, some of them would have been a little bit luxurious, so they could have had it, but the common folk wouldn't have. And then of course I'm going to put spices in here as well, just because I can. Spices were very expensive. Pepper and things like this were very, very expensive. In fact, I've put a bit of garlic in here. Garlic was considered a poor man's food. The sort of upper class would opt for more, luxurious imported spices. Food was about pageantry in the upper class, and so whatever you could afford was more likely to sort of be something you would use to show off. So you'd show off to your guests. You probably wouldn't bring the spices out all the time. You'd bring them out if you're having a party. But you know what? I live in 2022. I've got a bunch of spices. But the pot itself is just going to be full of, venison for a start, because I had some venison, so why not? But all the other ingredients that I'm going to throw in there are just shit that I found around the garden and around my home. So these are all very, very fresh ingredients. Some of these would have been considered very luxurious at the time. Some of them they wouldn't have even had, but some of them they would have. Firstly, I got some venison shanks. Chucked them in a pot with some potatoes I found in the cupboard. Then I added some carrot and onion, the noms from the garden, a tin of tomatoes, a splash of soy sauce just cause, and the real treat, some puccini sat, which I think is meant to read salt, which I made myself. We had a particularly fruitful winter forage, so if you haven't already, you should definitely check out all of our mushroom foraging videos. There is also a foraging playlist on our YouTube channel as well. I then added about a litre or so of water. This will act as a stock because of all the salts that are in there, so you don't need to actually add stock. And the pine mushrooms that I found in the local park, hopefully no dogs had pissed on them. I did wash them, however. Now, to really give it a bit of punch, I threw some garlic in there, a fair bit of paprika, it's Hungarian sweet paprika, and some whole black peppercorns. Now, usually I would add an absolute mega ton of chili to this, but as I'm serving this to other people, I don't know if they even like chili or what their tolerance is. I love it, as you know, but other people might not, so I left it out. You can always add chili to it afterwards. Hey, that's the good stuff.
Plop a little bit in that.
Oh yes, with our custom holsters. Just a quick shout out to my boy over at LHOH Leathercraft for these excellent custom chili sauce holsters that he made for us. The craftsmanship is undeniably brilliant, and they were specifically commissioned for our bottle sizes. So straight up, just a quick shout out because these are awesome. So after stewing for about 5 or 6 hours on a very low heat, I removed the shank, stripped the meat off the bone, shredded it, and then put it back in the stew, keeping the bones out for later. You can use those bones as a stock, but I just chucked them away. The meat is tender and succulent. So now, on to the fair! Huzzah! This year's Barossa Medieval Fair was absolutely jam-packed. So before we get stuck into the stew, we had to make sure we sold enough sauce. And sell we did. We sold out of just about everything despite making almost 3 times as much stock. It just goes to show that other people also agree that life's better hot. But before we get stuck into the stew and some of the events, I needed a refreshing beverage. You better get me one while you're at it. Yeah. How you doing, bud?
Hey, mate.
Good on you. Day 1 of the Barossa Medieval Fair had come to an end, so now it's time for us artisans, peddlers of various wares, performers and general ratbags, rascals and rapscallions to kick back, have a few cheekies and feast. We caught up with our fair friends the Northumbrians, ate damper off the forge and gorged on the venison stew I made, but sadly it was too dark and I was a little too tickled to capture any decent footage, but you would just have to take my word for it, the food and the company was glorious.
It's like a wave.
Yeah, I never thought of it as a wave before, but yes, it's a wave. It's
Yeah.
a...
You can't finish one and then
No.
not be moving the other.
No, that's right.
That would be insane.
Fortunately, there was enough stew left over that we could have some more for breakfast, so that's what we did. Big reveal, my
Do you
dear.
want me to scoop it?
Yeah. Oh, I've immediately fogged up the camera.
Is that shank?
That's a shank, yeah. Describe it to me in 25 words or less.
Oh, fucking good.
Look how muddy it is. It's so insane. Alright, I'm gonna need to eat some of this in a minute. Oh man.
How good is venison stew on a cold morning at the medieval fair after a night of debauchery?
It's good. Oh man, that's one of the best stews I've ever made. No shit. I don't want to sound like I love myself or anything, but I'm the greatest man that's ever lived. So with day 2 upon us, we ate heartily for breakfast, set up our stall and peddled our wares. We had an amazing time at the fair. We ate, we drank, we met a bunch of awesome folk while spreading our love of the mighty chili. I have been partaking in medieval fairs for well over a decade now, either playing music in the tavern, selling my sauces, or just hanging out and having a good time with like-minded and fun folk. These kinds of things bring people together and strengthen our community. The Barossa Medieval Fair and similar events around the country will always hold a special place in my heart. Thanks to everyone who came out to support us, special thanks to those that made it all possible, and thank you for watching. Take care and farewell.
Stop playing with your food.
Come on! Get
Marshall, let me have one more. Get a pudding, my lord. Get a pudding. Just, really feel it. Yes. Thank you, mate.